Today, we're going to be looking at how you can create detailed floor plans in Giraffe. So what you can see on the screen here is I've actually created a number of typical plans laid out below, and each of them is a group of usages that I've carefully mapped out. So we can see I've got a 1-bedroom unit, I've got a corridor, got a core, and my 2 and 3 beds, each with a dynamic annotation correlating to the area of that unit. So this is a group, and I've then referenced this group using the flow tool into my primary built form that we see at the top of the screen here. And any changes that I make to my reference group will then flow through into my built form without me having to jump in and try and edit that particular floor, as that can get quite troublesome. So if I click on my group, click once more to edit, this unit here, if we start to grow that, I can see that where that's referenced in my primary built form, that is also adapting. So if I drag that out and then also drag the neighboring unit out as well, we can see both of those changes reflected in my design. I don't have to jump in and change anything here. I can do it all through the floor plan, which is a much more controlled way of drawing your geometry. It's actually a very simple process, the way we achieve this in Giraffe. So I'm going to talk through that, and we might use the adjacent site here as a bit of a use case for this demonstration. So what I need to do first is create my floor plan. So I've got a number of floor plans here, and I'm just going to quickly toggle into 2D mode, and then I'll turn on the grid as well. So I'll just grab the retail. Let's say it's a ground floor retail. I'm going to use this grid and snap, and then I'm going to break this geometry and drag it up back like so. I'm just going to snap this to the grid so we can snap that there. And so this is going to be my ground floor. It's quite large, so let's actually reduce that. And let's bring this one down as well. Something like that is a little bit more realistic. So what I'm going to do is actually drag this off my floor plan, because I'm going to use this as my new referenced ground floor plan. And I need to add one more element in order to make that a group. So, and what we need there is a point. So if I navigate up to the basic shape tools, grab the point, and this is going to be my reference point. So wherever I put it is where I'm going to be able to move this geometry and sort of stack it from. So I'm just going to grab the corner here. Normally you'd grab the core or something. I'm not going into that level of detail for this example, but you can edit and sort of adjust the core and sort of the unit types, as you can see above. It depends how much time you're going to invest in this process. Okay, so I've got my point. I'm going to hold shift and select my floor plan as well. I'm going to group them together, and then I'm going to rename. So let's just call this training ground. That'll do. All right, so we're going to save that. And so now I've got my first floor plan. And the way we reference that is using flow. So we need to call upon this group. We know the group's name. And so what we're going to do is place another point on the map here. So I'm going to navigate up to here, point, and I'm going to hold S, snap that to the grid. This is where I want that reference point that I just created to drop in and reference my group. Okay, so what we need to do now is actually go into the flow editor. We're not doing anything too complex here. We're doing a very sort of simple transformation in order to link that floor plan in. So I'm going to navigate to my flow editor. We're going to toggle to the legacy flow. So this one over here, and you'll see straight away under raw transformations, we've got what's called an instance group. So I'm going to select the instance group. And if I drag this out, you can see that a little bit more clearly. We've got the feature, the instance group, and the output of the usage. So what I can do is actually jump over on the left-hand side to this panel here under the output, and I can see my instance group category. So I'm just going to drop that down, and it gives me an option here to enter the group ID So that was the training ground. Or I can actually pick and select directly from the screen. So I'm going to select that one. I'm going to select pick. And then I'm just going to minimize this panel so I can see my floor plan. I'm going to navigate. So I'm in my crosshairs and I'm just going to select my floor plan. And you can see straight away that it has referenced that group. And just to double check that, if I start to adjust that, yep, we can see that's all adjusting and linked as expected. All right, so we've got our first, I'll just close out of this. We've got our first ground floor in. If I toggle back into 3D mode, we've actually got 2 levels on that as well. And so what I've got here is 2 floors. So ideally what I want to do is I want to avoid having my stacked floors within the reference plane, as that just sort of complicates things. I just want to keep it as a single level, and I want to have the levels property within the reference point. So for example, if I click on my floor plan here and then start to use Q&A in order to adjust the levels, we can see that that is reflected over there. However, what I want to achieve is just have a single level here, and I want my levels property to be controlled from selecting this object here. So I've selected my instance group over here, and what I need to do is actually add the levels property. So if I add levels here, and now when I use Q&A on my keyboard, I can directly control the levels property from here, which then allows me the flexibility to keep this as a single floor and control it like the ones above. All right, so when we start to stack these floors, so if we're looking at the next typical floor plate up, we're probably looking at level 1 to 6, for example. So if I drop this one down back to a single level, the best way to do this in order to make sure that they are directly aligned on top of each other is to copy and paste them directly on top of each other, or you can use your base point tool function. So if I navigate into 2D, if I just Control-C, Control-V, what we've done is stack that group on top of each other. We need to make sure the stack order is higher, so we move that up to 2. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create another group, and we're going to adjust the reference group in this object here. So let's toggle into 2D. I'm going to copy this across here. So I'm going to grab, this is going to be my level 2. This is level 1. Oh, this is ground, sorry. This is level 1. And then I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to ungroup that because we're going to create a new group, and we're going to group this as level 1 to 6, for example. Select OK. And now I can start to edit this. So let's say it actually steps in here. And we bring this side in here, and we want a residential stacked on top of the retail. So I'm just going to change the usage, and we can introduce a little bit of articulation as well. So what I did was actually separate it out into individual units, and you can do exactly that. I'm just sort of creating a little bit of character, not going into that level of detail just for this example. Okay, so you will notice that my reference point has now moved. And so this is why I mentioned earlier, it's good to locate this point around your core, as that's typically going to be in the same spot all the way up, whereas your facade can start to articulate and step in, and you can have setbacks, which is what we just saw with this example here. It's still going to work because I've copy and pasted it directly above, so we should be fine here. All right, so we've got my group, my level 1 to 6, and now what we need to do is change the reference that's happening over here, which is we've got the stack order 2, so I've grabbed the correct one, and we'll see in a second if I had it. And now we want to look at the output. So we're editing the flow for this point, and we want to change the instance group from the training ground. And I'm going to pick and select my new group with the residential and add that on top. So that looks like it's aligned nicely, which is good. And we need to do one more thing, which is the levels property. However, that's already carried across because we copied it up. So we actually don't have to do that, which is handy. So if I start to add my levels and start to create my building, I can see that that is growing there. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got our level 1 to 6. It is worth mentioning that the way I've set this up, you might have already noticed that I've split the reference floor plans in the layers panel on the left-hand side here. So these are all my reference floor plans for the building on the left. And if I toggle that off, we can see that they all disappear, and I'm drawing these new drawings on that ground layer as well. So I can move that across. And so now if I go up to proposed mixed-use tower, I can turn that off completely, and it isolates that geometry. So we're separating out our reference projects, our reference floor plans, and our proposed development. So if we needed to, we could always turn that off, and that way we've only got our development that we're interested in, especially if we're creating presentations or views from this. We don't want to be able to see this working drawings, essentially, is what that is. We want to kind of hide that behind the scenes. So that's how we would do that. You'd put them on your separate layer group there. The benefit of that as well is that all of what we're doing here is linked to analytics. So I've set up a very basic yield here on the right-hand side, and you might have already noticed that. But if I click into the instance group here, and I start to add levels, we see that all of the count 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units that are relevant, and then also the total, are growing with each of those levels. So that dynamic relationship is established with any of the changes that we make throughout this process. And what I've done is actually separate them out onto layer groups. So in analytics, we can filter that. So I've got proposed mixed-use tower and base map group, which I actually need to hide. So that's a good demonstration to sort of talk through that process, because I don't need this information shown. I'm just interested in my proposed mixed-use tower layer. So if I navigate up to configure, I want to jump down to settings, and I want to hide groups. So here I can see base map, and I want to remove that. So you can see I've also hidden the reference floor plan group, and that's because I don't want that information populating in my analytics. I only want the instance group data processing through for my yield here. So any changes I make to any of these other layers won't actually be displayed because they're in a separate layer group. So it's important when you are setting up a project like this that you manage the layer tree effectively.